name's Zack. I do a presentation about Northwest Coast Formline, and I try to make it as brief as possible, but usually how these things go is I start talking and then I lose track of time, so trying to move on, trying to get in there as fast as possible. Formline is basically a system of rules for arranging shapes into a given space. And there's rules how they fit together, and there's rules about the different colors you can use. And it's been pretty stable, pretty much ironed out what the rules were for quite a long time. This piece here is about 350 years old. Pretty sure it's Xinjiang due to the shape of the hands here and kind of the orientation of the box itself. I've heard researchers say that there's 500 or 600-year-old pieces that pretty much follow the same rules as the kind of rules we use today. I would believe that because the person who told me was a lifelong Formline artist. So moving on kind of into the breakdown of the actual shapes. There's primary, secondary, and tertiary, or third. The primary is always black, usually. There's always exceptions to the rules, but almost always it's going to be black. And Nathan Jackson writes a little thing in his children's book about Formline. The primary is the one you can put your finger on and go around the entire piece. So you can see, if you go over here, you go around, comes back over here. This goes around, comes back here. And it's always the thickest as well. The thickest line is the primary. And so the thickest would probably be up here, would be the thickest line on the entire piece. But none of the other elements are any thicker than that. And then we have our primary, and then we have our secondary, which is this red here. And the secondary almost always lives inside of the primary. It kind of fills these spaces, further divides these spaces we've created with the primary into these little smaller units. This is secondary here. And then our tertiary, which would be our pin lines, would take up the rest of our space here. So this is tertiary Formline. This is tertiary here. This is tertiary inside of here. Now, another thing too to think about is everything is situated inside of the piece so that it's not floating. If you look at the distance between this and the distance between this, usually always the same. The distance of the tertiary and the distance to the primary. This is about the same there, 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 about the same there. And everything has a place, everything is ordered. There isn't anything that isn't based off of the shape of something else. Everything is kind of cascading these lines, ordered off of each other. Nothing's floating. Even the spaces that aren't filled with actual Formline or paint, this space as well. This is following a set of rules. You know, they say everything is thin to thick to thin in Formline. So you can see this goes thin, it reaches a peak thickness, and then it becomes thinner. Thin, thick, thin. Same with the spacing on the outside of this ovoid. here. Thick, becomes thinner, reaches maximum thinness, then becomes thick again, and then reaches the thickness again. Nothing's floating, everything's ordered, everything is kind of structured. And you hear a lot of Formline artists say, well, if there's rules to everything, where is the individuality? Where is the creativity in it? And that's the real mystery behind Formline. We have all these structures and rules, but within this framework we have to live inside of. We try and push the limits of what we can express and what we can show. And how that presents itself, what shape that expression takes inside of Formline. It's usually where we divide things, where we place things. And a lot of it is design. It's design and symmetry in mathematics is where it really comes down to. Now, I don't know if I killed my time here. Let's look at another piece. They call this archaic Formline because things are very bold. This is a very old piece. So everything is very bold. This secondary here, very bold. And I can go through some of the shapes too. These kind of circular round forms are called an ovoid. This is an ovoid. This is an ovoid here. This is an ovoid here. Some of the more U shapes like this, these are called U forms. This is a U form. This is the U form here. And then off of this U form are smaller U forms. But as you can see, compared to the last piece, this is a newer style, so it has a lot of unfilled spaces. As older pieces do not have a lot of filled-in spaces. And the reason why they did this is because it was a carved art form. Paint wasn't used as much to show the design as carving was at the time. So every place you see here where there is no paint, these areas would need to be carved. So what they did was made the areas that needed to be carved very small. Since everything needed to be carved, the areas to be carved were small and the lines are much thicker. And another reason they did that too as well, the economy of work, economy of labor. They didn't just make one or two of these. This is extremely old. And you have to imagine that most of the pieces by this person have been lost to time, but they made a lot. People made a lot of storage boxes. A lot of Tlingit people, Haida people, Tsimshian people made a lot of storage boxes. And so if you want to make a lot of boxes and you want to do it quickly, of course you would make these areas that needed to be carved smaller. But as we got further along, we became more stylized. And the tools and techniques improved as well. But they say some of the oldest pieces of Formline of Northwest Coast art, and they're several thousands of years old, are pictoglyphs, pictograms, carved into stone. So I couldn't say for sure what the origin of Formline was, but it seems to be, most people seem to think that it was a carved art form. It was carved first. And then as time went on, and people became better and better at the art form, they made it more complicated. And so there was a second color, and then a third color. And this is more modern. This is late 1800s. Sometimes they say that was the peak in native Northwest Coast art was the 1800s, either late 1700s, early 1800s, because they say because the culture was still more intact, the native economy still existed, and the market for these things amongst Tlingit people, Haida people, Tsimshian people were it more existed at the time. They were more culturally significant. And we're moving on to the early 1900s, people started to receive a missionary education, and as a byproduct of that, they think that the things weren't as valued as much. But that's changed in recent times. Now they're very valuable. Extremely valuable in some cases even. But as you can look at this design, this a lot of times native art it's like a deed of ownership. You're displaying a crest on an object to say that someone owns this box, someone owns this totem pole, and on that you're telling a story of ownership. You're showing a picture of a killer whale because you have a story about a killer whale that explains how you have a deed or title to a certain piece of land or a certain picture or image or a certain song. But in this case, this isn't telling a story. This isn't a piece of clan ownership. It's a piece of fine art for art's sake. It's simply a beautiful picture in order to add value to an object. And they specifically made it so that it didn't have anyone's particular imagery or clan crest, like a bear or a wolf or even an eagle or a raven. Raven was a little more loose. A lot of people could claim ownership to a raven. But these were made for almost resale amongst other indigenous people, other native people. So art for art's sake, developed completely independent of any kind of Western tradition, completely isolated, been in development for thousands of years. But purely art for art's sake, paint on wood, art for art's sake. And so you can look at these individual things and wonder what is he trying to depict here? What is it trying to show? And this one in particular, a lot of people have said a lot of things about what they thought it was. I think Charles Edenshaw, probably one of the greatest contemporary masters of high art, seemed to think that it was a raven transforming because of the various motifs on it. That's what he thought it was. We don't know. We don't know. And oftentimes, when we ask artists nowadays, contemporary artists now who work with Formline, what an art piece is, oftentimes they will say, it's whatever you want it to be. They didn't have an intent when they put these shapes together. They were just following the rules of how the shapes are allowed to fit together. And this is what they came up with. So I don't think it's difficult. It's difficult to say what it is. I could say, this is a hand, this is a head, this is a body, this is a head, this is a wing, this is a head with a beak, this is also a face, more of a human face. This almost looks like whale baleen. But, so what Edenshaw said was this was raven transforming. So this would be the head, this would be his beak, this would be his wing, and this would be his body, his claws. And over here, this would be his head plume, this would be his head, mouth here. This would be his wing, arm moving into his tail feathers back here, and here's his claws and feet. It could be, but I'm not sure. For me, it feels like it's an abstract, and they did that at that time. They made abstract pieces. They made art for their own enjoyment, their own amusement, and mostly, I feel like, for other artists. So I hope you enjoyed that. That was my little presentation about Formline. I hope I didn't talk too much. And I hope it was informative. Thank you.